So how many of you have looked at Google Analytics 4, which is the new version? How many of you actually know that Google Analytics is going away? Okay, only one person. Guys, type in. Let's make it interactive. It's not me talking and you guys listening. Let's have the conversation. Let's have the dialogue. So Google Analytics, as you know, is that this is a session I did for a small business community. So I repurposed it and thought I'll do it for this community as well. What's different now and why should you care? Let's talk about it. But before we dive in, people don't know who I am. Some of you might know, some of you might not. I have been in the industry for over 20 years. I started dealing with web analytics when it wasn't even called web analytics. And then digital analytics came on board. But I started dealing with importing raw web server logs into a database. And that's where we ran all the reports. So we didn't have these reports. We created our own reports on top of that. I came from a engineering background. I was dealing with software development, and then my passion was in data. So that's where I gravitated towards. And part of that was coming in and talking about using web data. Web was very new at that time. And I just stumbled upon that. I just became passionate, went to my boss, worked for free to get that in my extra time to learn how all this works. So we imported web server log data into the databases and ran reports on top of that. And then I worked for a tool vendor, which was prior to Adobe existed, prior to Google existed. We worked with several clients there, including Microsoft, Nordstrom. Back then, we were doing, this is 2001, we were doing, 2001 is not when I started earlier than that, but 2001 is when we were doing targeting, personalization, recommendation, which Google did not have till 2006, 7, maybe 8. So that's how far back I go. And now the new version of Google Analytics, where it's going is actually going back. And this is what I wrote in my Twitter thread. And you can see if you follow me on Twitter, that how many people who have been in the industry talking about this. We are going back to where we started. And I'll talk about that. And that's why I'm excited, because we lost our way by aggregating the data. But before that, about me, 20 plus years in digital marketing and analytics. Sometimes I write 17, sometimes 20, not sure exactly when the transition happened. I went to engineering college in India, came to do my master's from University of Tennessee here in US. I'm in Seattle. I did my MBA from University of Washington. I teach there sometimes as well now. I'm a frequent speaker at various conferences, so you'll see me at generally marketing analytics summit conferences by Digital Analytics Association, but I've done other conferences too. Every now and then I'll speak there, but those two I'm pretty much every time I'm there. So next session I'm doing on A/B testing in Digital Analytics Summit, and also running a workshop on BigQuery and SQL. I was on the board of Digital Analytics Association when it was called Web Analytics Association. And then during my tenure, this is where we transition into becoming Digital Analytics Association. So if you are not familiar with Digital Analytics Association, then I recommend that you check them out. It conducts a lot of local sessions, which is the symposiums. That's what I started when I was on the board. My whole task was, I'm passionate about teaching. So my whole goal was to bring teaching and at conferences to local levels. And part of that was coming up with DAA symposiums. I've led digital marketing and analytics for various agencies. I started a company back in 2007, which we sold in 2008, became profitable. So right time to sell it. Since then, I've worked for several agencies, startups, and now my sole focus is Optizent and Optizent Academy. We have two parts to it. This is where I have done teaching for several years, University of British Columbia, which is in Canada. Microsoft, I ran their program around A/B testing, how to use data to create better customer experience, better products, etc. So I ran that and taught classes there. University of Washington, this is where I did my MBA. So I teach there in their master's program. I was teaching on how to use data for digital communication. And then Bellevue College, I run several classes there, different topics, but all around digital marketing and analytics. My focus has always been analytics even though I have done all sorts of display advertising, SEO, paid search, etc., email marketing, but it's all data driven. So I always focus on the data aspect of it. Optizent, which is, I founded this, which is a digital analytics and consulting firm, as well as training. My passion, again, is training. So I focus that on training. I wanted to build a training company. That's what I started doing. But people who were corporate clients who were getting trained, they were asking for consulting help. So we started the consulting side of business as well. It was after training started. So my focus is there. I still love teaching training. That's why I do these sessions. And I have Optizent Academy where you can become a member and learn everything that I know. I do in-person sessions every week, pretty much with my students and members. Here's a map showing where my students are. 153 countries now, over 40,000 students. Some of my clients that I worked with. So now you get an idea about what I've done in the industry and where I come from. So the type of knowledge I have here. So before I dive into Google Analytics, and Brian says I started in Urchin prior to 2005 Google buyout. Yep. Yes, I worked in Urchin with Urchin as well before it was Google. And then when Google bought it, worked with Google, coming up with this premium services that they offer. It was called GA Premium, GA 360. Worked with them on that part as well. Cool. And Ellen has worked for years as well. So Ellen and I have worked on a few things together as well. Web analytics, before I go into Google Analytics, because a lot of chatter, and I assume a lot of you came from that Facebook group that is, around GA. We have a lot of technical discussions all around, like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I do that? However, I want to remind you that that is one group that I run. There are other groups as well, where we, there is a more focus around other stuff. So digital analytics is the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting. That's the definition of website and digital channel. Data for purpose of understanding and optimizing web and digital channels. So keep that in mind. Google Analytics is a small part of what we do. Implementation is actually a very small part of what needs to happen. Granted, there are career paths where people will go into implementation or technical side of things. I did a session with DAA last week on the career progression, going from not knowing anything to becoming a leader in the industry. How do you go that, bridge that gap? What do you learn, etc. But, and I, yesterday or day before yesterday, I mentioned this on Twitter as well. The program that I have, we don't talk about GA or GTM till like 4th week into the program. It's a 12-week program. And I only spent 2 weeks on GA GTM implementation or talking about it, because web analytics is, like, as you can see, the purpose is to optimize, to understand. And that's what the purpose should be. I see questions where people are asking, like, what is that report? Where did this go? Where did that metric go? For me, is like, why don't you step back and think about what you're trying to do? And then the metrics will start to make sense rather than looking at the metrics and complaining about them. But that's a separate discussion. I just wanted to make sure you guys understand what the definition is. Many of you who have been in the industry already have been through this several times. So, digital analytics tool, there are several tools in here. So when you're thinking about Google Analytics, how it's changing, why it's changing, think about these various tools that can actually help you with a bunch of stuff. For measurement, you have GA, GA4. For collection, you have GTM, right? Analysis, you have Data Studio and BigQuery in addition to that. So keep that in mind. This is where most of the power is going to come in your BigQuery. Every single data point, that is every single thing that happens on your website, now can be transferred into BigQuery. I heard, which I haven't seen yet from our clients, because most of our clients are not hitting that limit in GA yet, or we are implementing GA4, but in Adobe Analytics, we work with Adobe Analytics as well. But I heard today, again, this morning on Twitter, that there is a limit on how much data you can send from GA4 to BigQuery. But we'll talk about that in a minute here. Reporting, you got Data Studio. So don't be bogged down by like, hey, those who have looked at GA4 I can't do this, I can't do that. You have two other things, Data Studio and BigQuery. So take a look at those. Understanding is your purpose is not just implementation collection, but understanding what is happening and then optimizing. Where is Google's optimize? So you have all these tools that are available to you. However, our focus is this side, mainly GA4. So let's talk about Google Analytics. You know, what's happening? Universal Analytics last day is June 30th, 2023. Now this date can change, most likely will change because there will be so much pushback on Google. However, it might not change for a long time. I mean, you might not get it extended for a long time. Maybe by end of the year, next year, it'll be gone. We'll have to wait and see. GA4 is the new version. And I like how it's actually their logo. I'm not sure if that will change, but you have all these different things that are putting in, sending data into it. And that's one of the big changes that has happened with GA4 is all cross-device multi-channel view. You can even send offline data into that and it'll all be connected if you implement it correctly. So we know, several channels in past we had your website data was separate from your app data. You have Google Analytics App plus Web. Now they have combined this into all this into one view. Earlier they had these two separate, but now you have combined all these. So no matter what channel people are coming from, Facebook ads, social search, direct, and you can get one comprehensive view of that data. So that is one of the things that has happened. Familiar, the change is 2023. Yeah, in 2023, that's next year, right? I lose track of dates. I was wondering, like, is it 2022, 23? Because I'm still doing taxes for 2021 today. Yeah, so change is happening next year, which is another year plus 3 months, I guess, 2 months remaining for you to transition into GA4. If you want year over year reporting in GA4, time is now. Implement it now. It'll take you time to understand. It'll take your time for your stakeholders to understand GA4. Okay, we'll look at that question in a minute here. So what's going away? Familiar interface that's you have been used to for years, that's going away. And I wrote a blog post on this. Google Analytics is bad. I hate Google Analytics or something like that. Whenever things change, that's our human nature. We resist change. We don't like what's presented to us. Why? Because we're so used to it. However, believe me, once you get used to this interface, once you start using it on daily basis, you'll start to appreciate what Google Analytics 4 has to provide. I am no way affiliated with Google Analytics. Google Analytics won't even take my call. However, I like the direction it's going. If there was another tool doing similar thing, I would love that tool as well. But this is what's happening. Familiar interface is going away. A new one is coming up. Views are going away or are no longer there. However, I do believe, again, no, I don't have any background on this. I do believe they'll bring views back. In some way, they will bring it back. There are ways to actually get the data to a view level kind of thing, but there are certain things missing yet. Several canned reports or predefined reports have gone away, which actually is a good thing. They might bring some of those reports back, but I think that's a very, very good thing that they have taken those reports away, because once you're given something, you tend to use it. Even though if it doesn't make sense, you'll pull the number and put it in a dashboard or a report or a PowerPoint and say, hey, look, this is what's happening, without even understanding, is it really relevant to me? So I like that the reports, there are fewer reports, because you can create your own reports and put them in Google Analytics 4. Yeah, so views were where Ellen is asking views. I'm pretty sure people are familiar with this reporting where you had the property and then you have the views. Views were a filter where you can apply certain filter and see the data in a certain way. So yeah, but it's paid feature. Yes, George, for now, but I think they will bring it back. So the view is a way for you to get the data in the way that you want by applying certain filter. Let's say internal versus external, which is available in GA4. But let's say you want to look at data by appending certain, the domain of your site. You can create that filter, and there is a view filter. Google always recommended having a raw data view, which means no filters on it. Why? Because it made it debugging easier. After promoting that for years, they took away the whole notion of views. So I don't understand the reasoning behind it, but I'm pretty sure it's going to come back. Bounce rate, as we know, it's gone. However, I did see some chatter about bounce rate being or coming back. However, in my opinion, bounce rate was the worst metrics because it made sense when it came out, but it didn't make sense in recent years. Because what is a bounce rate? A person comes to your site, looks at one page and leaves. That's the default definition. A bounce rate came, looked, and went. What if that person spent 15 minutes on your site? Looking at that, blogs have that challenge. Your bounce rate is going to be higher. So we were creating custom definition of engagement for our clients. Because if somebody's spending 15 minutes scrolling back and forth, looking at some stuff, that is an engaged session, even though it might be a bounce. So a lot of people were creating that. And now Google gave you the engagement metrics, and now everybody's complaining about bounce rate because a lot of dashboards and reports had bounce rates on them. So maybe they'll come back, or you can just do 100% minus engagement rate. That's your bounce rate, even though it's not apples to apples comparison with the previous version of bounce rate, previous definition of bounce rate. Okay, yes, views a subset. I hope they do make it available. George is saying they do make it available. Yeah, maybe. I don't, in my opinion, engagement has much better metrics, and one minus engagement or 100% minus engagement rate will work. But again, you have to look at your definition, what makes sense for your business. This is why when I said we don't even talk about tracking and tagging till 4th week, because we spent a lot of time thinking about how to collect the business requirements. Most of the sites we come across when clients give it to us are over-tagged. Over-tagged means there are tags sitting there, metrics sitting there, nobody's paying attention. If people don't know why they were included, they are on the dashboard, they are on the reports, but nobody knows why and what they're doing with it. So that's why I think it's a good time for you to think back, sit back and say, what do we really need for this transition? Okay, bounce rate. Import metrics or junk data from December. Okay.
Just shared an article from many years ago that I wrote. So people have to justify it to their people they report to. They can use some of the points I made back in 2017. So you can tell how old it is.
Yep. All right. I'll check it out. Right. If they're up to date on the blog, they're only going to visit one page, but time is more relevant than the bounce. Still nice to have though. Yeah. I mean, nice to have, Brad, totally agree. It might make sense for certain scenarios. Again, some metrics might make sense for me, but not for you. Having those scanned reports where every metrics was shown and people are just putting those metrics is the challenge. I mean, we always educate clients on what makes sense. You don't need all 15,000 metrics and 15,000 ways of looking at the data. What are you trying to do? I mean, this is what I teach in my A/B testing class as well, is what is that we're trying to do? That's the central question. Once you answer that, maybe bounce rate is the metric, right? Old tracking is going away, so you'll have to move to the new tracking. This applies to pretty much everything, your events, your e-commerce tracking, every tracking is going away. Some of the tracking has been made redundant by new tracking. So we'll talk about that. Well, I think, I'm talking about that later in there. And then old data is going away. There was somebody asking, can we merge this data together in the Facebook group? There's no point in merging the data. Yes, there will be certain things that you might require, like how many conversions we were getting, etc. You can't merge. The data models are different. So don't even try to think about merging the data. Forget about that. There is a clean cut happening. Start educating your stakeholders, whoever you're working with, your teams, and start working with them on educating the new way of thinking. Start thinking this in the, right now. What do we want? Why does this tool exist? What is the purpose? Who's using it? What metrics, what actions are they taking? What metrics do they need? What actions they are taking? Start from there. That's when you will have a clear understanding of how to transition. GA4 provides a lot of power to you. But I was thinking about this quote from, I think it's a Spider-Man quote, right? With great power comes great responsibility. I think it's Spider-Man. Yes. So with this power, you have responsibility as well. How are you going to structure? You can have 25 parameters for events. You can have 25 user properties. However, there is a limit on how many custom dimensions you can have. So you have to start thinking about if each, you have 10 events and all of them have 25 different parameters, then you have 250 parameters, all doing different things. Now you're collecting the data, but you won't be able to use it. So you have to really think, what do we want? Look at a bigger picture. Sure, things will change, but think about that right now and then audit it every few months. Older data being deleted 3 to 6 after end of was mentioned by Google. Yes, great point, Alan. 6 months. They're saying by December, it stops collecting data in June, and then you won't have access to the old data after December. So you'll get 6-month time frame. So what's new? Simpler data model. I believe it's a simpler data model than what we had. You had, page view was there. You had e-commerce tracking, which was in different way. Now it's all about events and users. We'll talk about that. You have event parameters for deeper insights, user properties to enrich user data. I was putting these together for a client last week about what kind of event parameters and user properties will make sense. So you have to think about those things. What can you provide and how will it impact the business? If you do not know what the business is about, what the CEO is trying to do, what the chief X something is trying to do, you cannot come up with these event parameters. You have to think about their goal. What do they want to know? So that's where all that thinking comes. You have to spend time. Cross-device data in one single view, built-in debugging tool, easier to comply with user and local laws to delete the data, machine learning to counter cookie deletion and missing data. And we'll go into the details of these one by one. Store historical data forever using native BigQuery integration. This one feature, like BigQuery integration, is a game changer for me. As I mentioned earlier, this is where we started from. So much power comes in when you have individual level data. You can't imagine the possibilities of analysis that you can do. And that's why I keep pushing. People should learn SQL, SQL, SQL. I run this workshop with DAA, and every time we run it, it's full because all the people who are already doing work, they are being asked like, hey, here is a data that's sitting here. You can do it. You can self-serve. And also with BigQuery, Google is already telling you that, hey, we can send it to BigQuery. You can do all sorts of things there. It allows for data enrichment using first-party and third-party data. You get better insights. So once you have the enrichment here, you get better insights and better targeting, better personalization. There's some comment here. Let me go through each comment. I'm going to stop here and then go through these comments to make sure I'm not missing any comment here. Oh, Mostafich, I think I'm saying it right. GA has a problem. The price of the item string is sketchy in debug view. It doesn't show the decimal point. It's the same with you. Well, that's a technical question. I can answer later. We can look at it. But yeah, if you have those kind of questions, definitely bring them up in that discussion forum in Facebook. Somebody will answer that. Somebody might have gone through it. I work with so many different tools and technologies, and my mind is thinking about certain other things than like how the tool actually is working. I love looking at these. I love training. But one day my mind be on a different tool than the tool that you're working on, a different problem. So I don't know exactly, but I can take a look or just post it there. Okay, yes, views, I got that. Yep. Is downloading old data as simple as few clicks and you get everything from UA, or is there some selection process or what data we want to save and access through BigQuery and the likes? Old data to BigQuery, you need to use a third-party tool like Supermetrics. It's not easy. Or you have Google APIs, you can build your own pipeline. Google might come out with a tool that will allow you to transfer that data into Google Sheets or BigQuery. I've heard chatter, but it's not confirmed. That's a possibility. So you can either wait for another 6 months, 1 year, and see what happens, or you can just use a third-party tool to transfer it. Now, again, you won't be able to combine them together without some processing. So that's where if you learn SQL, you might be able to do certain things. All right, so what might be back? This is my opinion. Views, there is extensive list of filters that were there are not there anymore. Again, to dive to the views and bounce rate. Again, that's just my understanding from looking at what people are complaining about, etc. So GA4, simple data model, you have two things you have to worry about, a user and an event. User, a person who interacts with your website or app. This could be a spider, a bot as well. They try to filter those out, but not all. This doesn't always work. Spiders and bots are smarter than these tools can catch up with them, or smarter than these tool algorithms. You know what percentage of traffic is a spider or by spiders and bots on a given site? Anybody wants to take a guess? Just type in, let me know. The person is described by user property. So a person has attributes, a note, wearing this color sweater, glasses, putting a headphone, whatever, this kind of hair color, eyes. Users have properties, and they are defined by these properties. So similarly, you can define any individual user on your site by these properties. There are 25 properties that you can assign to each user, and they can have different values. Somebody says 25%, Ellen says, Kerry says 50%. That's a good question. Seems high when I review my server records. What's high? Robert, 75%. Brian, 33%. You guys are all correct because it depends on the size of the site. Robert said it's 75%. Many sites, if you have a blog, other than you, 99% of the traffic is going to be blogs, spiders. If you just build it out and put it, you'll get bot traffic. Sites like Bing, which is huge site, gets 50% of traffic as bots. They filter them out, but it's 50%. I'm sure Google is close to that. So 25% might be low, Alan. I think it's more like 50 to 90%. That's why you have to filter out. You can't make decisions on bot traffic.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
it's from the majority of my client sites where I do filter them out and then analyze them.
You still see
e-commerce world, I'm seeing about 25 on average, or to 30%.
Yeah,
but if it's a blog site, 50% yeah. Could easily be 90%. It's and I will let everyone know here. Just sorry to interrupt you. When you do the comparison of your universal analytics to your GA4 analytics, they're doing a far better job of automatically filtering out bots.
Yeah.
And I'm having an issue with some clients now where they're going, why are my numbers so low?
Yeah, and that's a real challenge because it's going to happen. You've been counting bot traffic, and now all of a sudden it's real traffic. And that's why GA4, I like it because it has inbuilt machine learning algorithms that actually does a lot of heavy lifting for you. So you might not create a filter for filtering these out, but they look at all the traffic and they say, okay, this looks like a bot pattern, right? Earlier we had to, even in Adobe Analytics, I remember years ago, we were working with a client and we saw huge activity they were running an ad, and that ad drove people to this site. So we saw a huge spike in our traffic, which seemed very kind of, impossible. But client looked at that spike and they already sent an email out to everybody in the company saying, hey, look, we're driving tons of traffic to our site. My team started looking into the data. We said, well, we can't comment what kind of traffic this is. We started looking into the data and we found it was the spider activity because the spider was pinging, coming, and there was no filters. I mean, those spiders are smart. and how they position themselves. But when you see a lot of activity within few seconds, that tells you it's in spider activity. Now they had already pushed this to their up the chain in their organization. There was no way going back. So all we did was everybody was quiet and said, just leave it there. Let's not even talk about it. And this is what happens. Jumping too quickly to conclusions without looking and analyzing the data, analyzing the pattern, you can be in trouble. So, and now you are going to see these differences where spider activity is removed. And all of a sudden you go from, hey, we were having 1,000 visitors a day. How come we only have 500 now? Well, that's what's happening. So that's why run them in parallel. Don't compare numbers of visitors. I always say that it's about the directional improvement. Web analytics is not accurate, it's precise. So whatever tool you're using, it'll be precise in its own right. So think about that.
And I'll make the other point. Sorry to interrupt you again.
Yeah, no worries.
Since you're the Adobe guy, I've run with clients where we're running Adobe or Core Metrics plus Google Analytics. The numbers never match exactly.
Yeah,
we are always, using web analytics data, we're always analyzing trends, not absolute numbers. And that
exactly.
And for everybody here, that's something that GA4 is going to start forcing you more and more to think about ratios and trends, not absolutes.
Not absolutes. Sometimes you need an absolute to put little context, but it's about ratios. It's about directional improvement. Are we better than what we were yesterday based on this tool? Right. I remember when we were transitioning, there was a period, and Alan, maybe you remember this. There was a period when we had Core Metrics, we have Urchin, we had WebTrends, we had Google, we had other hundreds of tools out there. And companies were moving from one tool to another. They were switching WebTrends to Omniture, WebTrends to this tool, that tool. And every time this came up, like, why are my numbers not matching? They're doing proof of concept. The numbers are not matching. We had to explain it every time. It's not going to be accurate. No tool is going to be accurate. There's so many factors. Spiders and bots, everybody filters them in a different way. Cut over in the midnight, right? That's what you'll see with GA4 on how the session gets cut off in UA. In GA4, it continues. And you'll also have cookie deletions, which is always a problem. Blocking cookie deletion, that causes firewalls, right? Those cause the problem. There are a bunch of problems that'll happen. So you'll never get the numbers to match. Algorithm, the way these process in the backend, how sessions are calculated, how page views are calculated, what filters are applied, and how what kind of data they remove, what kind of data garbage that comes out. I was dealing with where we were looking at log files. We saw there were garbage data in there and the lines were unusable. So all we do is just delete those lines. And once you delete those lines, there is nothing you can do with those. There's no number to report. Yep. So here is the truth is in the trends. Yes, power is in the pattern. Correct. It's the same with Google Keyword Planner. All the numbers are different. The info just has to be actionable. Exactly. So think about those. Don't get hung up on the numbers. Many users' properties are automatically tracked by Google Analytics. So moving along, I just want to make sure we cover this. Many user properties are automatically collected, and some you can have up to 25 additional user properties for deeper understanding. I mean, occupation, subscriber versus non-subscriber, logged in versus not logged in users, loyal versus not loyal users. When you have the data in BigQuery and you can bring in other data sources, you can augment user information that you can push back into Google Analytics to get deeper segmentation. Topic of another discussion. I talk about that in my courses and my membership. So if you're interested, I'll give you a discounted coupon at the very end when we are talking about this, those who are interested in joining my group. Events, user interactions with the websites or app are tracked as events. Every user interaction or browser interaction or app interaction is app. Think about hits, right? People were talking about hits earlier. This is a hit scope, hit scope, hit scope. That is what is. Event is sort of a hit. And, back in old days, people used to say, how many hits you got on the site? What they meant was these hits. Well, they didn't mean that those hits, but that's how hits are. They're like every single interaction or every single thing that happens. When they said how many hits, they meant either page views or session visits or users. Events have parameters to define the event, to define that event. Similar to user properties, you can define an event with 25 parameters to provide you richer, deeper analysis. Many common events are automatically tracked to save implementation time. I talked about this in the first slide, or not the first slide, when I was talking about how GA4 is tracking certain things in certain events. Here are user properties that are automatically tracked. At age, if that's within Google knows the user, they'll calculate age, devices, interest, language, etc. Events, I talked about this. Automatically, let's talk about this. Name value pair, yep. Automatically captured events are language, page location, page referrer, page title, screen resolution. With page referrer, could be external or internal page referrer. Every page refers to another page, right? If you're on the home page and you go to a product page, home page is the referrer. So you can build the whole sequence and see what users are doing. If you just know how to put this data in BigQuery and then run queries, you can do all sorts of analysis. Oh, what happened here? Types of event collection. There's automatic event collection, enhanced measurement collection, recommended, and custom events. So automatic, we looked at this. What are the automatically collected events, event and parameters? There are enhanced measurement events, which allow you to track certain things that in past required you to set tags in GTM or on the page. Then there are recommended events. These are the events that Google recommends for you to use if your use case fits those. I'll talk about that. And then if none of these matches, then that's custom event. So automatic events, several events based on user interaction, such as session start, engagement. Those are all events. Maybe I'm calling, maybe there is an engagement, yeah, event. So these are all automatically collected for you. User comes to your site, session start event starts. It also triggers a page view event. It also triggers an engagement event after every 10 seconds of user's activity. Or if a user does the end action, that's defined as a conversion, or user goes to another page. So it just starts triggering those. And it keeps track of all that data. If I have time, I'll show you how exactly it translates into BigQuery. Looking at that, you'll see what kind of things they collect. Many event properties are automatically collected. We talked about those: language, page location, referrer, title, screen resolution. Enhanced events are the things that Google enables it for you. You can disable them if you would like, but page view, that tracks the page views. Scroll, which scrolls when a user vertically scrolls 90%. If you still have to capture other markers, then you have to send those parameters. And if you have to do horizontal, then you have to set that as well. Outbound clicks, so you no longer have to write a trigger or based on what type of link was clicked. It automatically tracks outbound clicks. So if you have Facebook link, Instagram link, etc., then it'll automatically track. This was a question somebody asked last week in the Facebook group, and they ended up using some trigger. I'm like, why are you using trigger? But that's fine. I didn't want to get into too many details. Let people do what they want to do. Search, on-site search, video engagement. So this embedded YouTube videos, it tracks all these events and file downloads. So earlier you had to enable these using Google Tag Manager or on-site tracking, but now they are automatically tracked for you, which is a big change. And I believe this is, again, me looking at that, what they're doing, seems like this list is going to grow. They'll look at the common scenarios, they'll look at the site, and they'll figure out what to track, which means less and less work for implementation. So if you are trying to think about implementation as my bread and butter, I would seriously start thinking about, rather than just focusing on the technical implementation, there will still be room for technical implementation. Those who want to go, there is, I talked about this in my career path presentation on what directions you can go. But if all you're doing is GA4 tracking, then I think this Google is going to do those automatically for a bunch of events. So think about how you can add value there. Recommended events, retail, they have bucketed certain events are recommended into these buckets. So if you have a retail or e-commerce site, they have listed out certain events that you can use. The names that they have provided, if you use those names, then in future, when they roll out new features or new reporting tied to those events, then they will be enabled for you. If you do not use recommended names, then you won't be able to benefit from future enhancements. So always look at this and see, is there something I can use? Even though your site might not be retail e-commerce. Let's say my site it's a blog. And on the blog, I have a lead generation where I ask people to sign up for my email list. Now it doesn't fall into any of these categories, but retail e-commerce has an event called generate lead, I think. Yeah, generate_lead. If I use that event name for generate lead event, even on my blog, which doesn't fit in this category, I will still enable my site, my Google Analytics, to receive future enhancement related to generate lead event. So always take a look, see if there is anything you can use from here. If yes, then use that event names and the required parameters. It'll make your life much easier. You don't have to think about like what parameters should I pass, etc. They are recommending those. You can pass more if you would like. If none of those automatically collected or enhanced or recommended make sense for you, then use custom events. And you can call whatever you want those events. You can pass any parameters that you want. So here's a recap. Users and events. Users have properties and events have parameters. That's it. This is the model. If you understand this model and grasp it, it becomes much easier for you to understand how GA4 works. Cross-device journey, we all know, it's not a secret. We all use it. We research on one device. Then we go back and purchase on another device. Sometimes I receive an email. Like this morning, I received an email from somebody, and Alaska Airlines, and it was on my phone. And they asked me to go to my desktop to enable certain thing. So I'm obviously going to go there. With this, this is becoming more and more common. You see something on TV, you browse it on your phone, then you go to desktop and do the end action. So this is where GA4 allows you to merge all this data together. And that's why you get a complete user journey. If you look at navigation, is also customer's journey related to that. Like, you have all these things where you have, trying to remember the name, but it's like the life cycle of a customer. They have organized the reports in that way. Debugging is inbuilt. So you don't have to wonder. However, I found some issues with debugging here. Sometimes the events don't show up, etc. But it's there. I think it'll improve over time. I like that. I can see my events when I'm browsing the site and see what's happening on my site, which events are being triggered, etc. Where we will be device category usage. Yes, you will still be able to do that, the reporting at that level. So the cross device is automatic with GA4. To a certain extent it is, because the users Google knows who the users are, most of them. But you can also, like in previous cases, you can also pass in user ID. I always say, if you know the user ID, use that user ID to stitch them together. But there is already some inbuilt automatic with GA4. Law and user data compliance. This is one of the things that GA4 allows you to do, or came up with this model. It makes it easier to delete the data when, every city, every country, every place has a different law, and users are demanding more and more control. So this impacts how the data is collected and used. Browsers, users are demanding. GA4 allows for easy compliance of local laws and user data deletion requests. So you can go in and delete the data from there. More and more users are asking for it. So that's why you have to think about why you're collecting it. What's the benefit to the user? And if that benefit is very clear, then users likely won't ask for data deletion. But I have seen where users are like saying, delete all my data. I see more and more controls will be coming in GA4 so that you can go in and delete that data that you need to remove. GA4 takes time to collect data. This is Shilpa saying debug view is very useful to check if G tag is working correctly. Yeah, I mean, I've seen lag in real-time reports. I have seen that where people put tags and they are wondering what's happening. Debug view allows you to remove the guesswork and see what's actually happening there. ML and AI to fill data gaps. Ellen and we were talking about earlier about the spiders and bots. AI and machine learning and AI are both removing those as well. Machine learning is removing all those spiders bot activities, but also it's trying to find insights. So you'll see insights surfacing in, they started doing this in UA, but not to that extent where they are now focusing more and more and saying you can use machine learning to find insights. It's already surfacing for you. So GA4 will come and talk about certain events and stuff. So if you start to see their machine learning algorithm goes and pushes out the insights. So that's a very big thing. Pay attention to those insights and see if they are useful. Also, their search bar is actually what I heard. Again, I haven't paid too much attention to it, but it's also machine learning driven. Works with or without cookies. This is one of the big changes where people are asking for data deletion, right? Laws are preventing users from sending laws are preventing you from collecting certain data, or there are cookie deletions or cookie blockers there. Machine learning can fill those gaps. And these are very accurate, actually. Even when the user does not provide cookie, they can identify who you are based on your browser, based on your footprint in the browser, based on your activity, etc. These machine learning algorithms are very, very smart. Not particularly, I'm talking about one GA, but I've seen some studies out there where you don't need cookies. Machine learning can figure out who you are based on how you use the computer, what browser you're using, how many times you're going, etc. So there is a ton of information there. Okay, how does the user identify? How can GA4 know when it's the same user on different devices? Great question. Few things. One, like I said, I always recommend if you have a user ID, use a user ID. So if I'm logging in here, I'm logging in there, it's the same user. You can stitch that. Google also, using machine learning, Google also, if you are a user like me, I have Gmail and Google. I search Google on here. I'm logged in. When I go on my desktop, I'm the same user. I'm logged in there. It's both same email address. I'm the same user. Even if I am not logged into a third-party site that's using GA here, there is a connection that can be used. I'm not exactly sure how they are stitching those. I mean, there are some laws, etc. there, but that's what they're using to fill these gaps. Any idea, Alan? Do you have any thoughts on how?
Just to myself off mute. So I posted it here. One of the things that I have noticed, and this was and Google is already doing this in Universal Analytics, and they did confirm it. You have a Google ID as you're pointing. So many users are logged in all day long. They have their Gmail open. And that represents probably, I hate to guess, but 78% of users in the world.
Yep.
So they know who you are between your device by your Google account, whether
Google account, yeah.
So that's your Google account. And that's also where they've been picking out your gender, your age bracketing, and your subjects of interest. And that's where they're pulling all that. That's why it's data sampling for that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't have, here's another thing, right? Even if, let's say you don't have a Google account. Now they have Google Analytics on, let's say, Wall Street Journal. You log into Wall Street Journal, you get a cookie. Then you go to ESPN. They also have Google Analytics or Google Ads or Google some tracking, Google conversion pixel or whatever, right? They have pixel there. You go there, you log into ESPN, right? They know it's the same user logging into this because they have Google Ads, Google Pixel, etc. Right? They are stitching those two together. They're building your pattern as well.
And they do, I believe, unless the security has improved on those sites, are picking up your user ID because it's being pushed to the data layer.
Exactly.
Anything that gets pushed to the data layer is visible to Google Analytics, whether we use GTM to read that variable, or if Google is running something unannounced in the background to read those.
Yeah, not only data layer. I showed in another session where your site, and I actually pulled up, I don't know which site I pulled up. Any site, there is so much hidden information on the site within the code that you can use. It's in JavaScript variables. They are all over the place. And I've pulled out several JavaScript variables in my session. If you haven't seen that, there is a recording.
Yeah, I saw that. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is so much information you can pull and connect. I mean, I did not know, like I use a third-party platform to host my courses. I don't collect email addresses, but when you log into their platform, it's exposed. Shopify, it's exposed. It's there. No matter which Shopify site it is, they are exposing those. They are available. You can see those things if you know where to look. And then you can build on using that information. You can build your own user ID, pass it. So, but again, we're getting too deep into this discussion.
Well, I see Aziz's question. Aziz, sorry to usurp this thing, but what percentage of accuracy is machine learning? I say it's probably as accurate as the way you've been doing it.
Exactly. It's very accurate. Actually, machine learning is more accurate.
It may be more accurate because it's excluding the bots. So you might actually be getting a more refined number. Once again, it all depends on sites and how I had a client, we've had a discussion tonight, where for 3 days their site had huge traffic and we narrowed it down to all coming from one city in Europe. They go, we don't even mark that area. So we know it was a bot.
Yeah. So machine learning is definitely going to fill that gap. And that's what they're doing. It's going to be, it's very accurate. Again, look at the data points they have to use this machine learning. It's not only that data. There's so much data out there, more than you even know exists. And as I said, I showed you in that JavaScript, in that course where I was walking through and showing you how the sites have all this information. Think about the information that's right there in front of you, but it's hidden from you. Well, machine learning can use a bunch of that data. All right, now moving along, historical data in GA4 data can be stored for 14 months. By default, it's 2 months. So if you do GA4, go and change that setting to 14 months. At least you'll have 14 months of data. Otherwise, when you go into the explore section, you can only go back 2 months. After 3 months, you'll be scratching your head and like, where did my last month's data go? Change that to 14 months. BigQuery plus native connectivity of GA4 allows you to keep data forever. Now, you might end up paying certain amount of money to BigQuery. That is also one of the reasons why GA is saying go and put it in BigQuery. But in some cases, like I've been using it for 1.5, 2 years, almost pretty much, and I only paid $0.01. But it's a test data. I keep deleting as well. I keep playing with it. Data integration, online data provides limited insights. You know, you can only look at certain things and say people came, they bounced, they did this, they did that, they did that, right? There is so many, only limited number of times you can beat that. But once you combine online data with offline data, first party CRM data and third party data, possibilities are endless. You'll end up spending 1+ year just looking at the weather impact, third party data on your site's traffic and conversions. Then think about other CRM data. User preferences are changing. I mean, one of the things I do is I look at, and this is I teach in my SQL class, is how to calculate users' loyalty, how to calculate their propensity to buy, etc. You overlay that on your users, and then you can target them in Google Ads by using segments in Google. There are a bunch of stuff you can do, but the possibilities are more. Now you can think your value as an analyst starts to shine when you can do these things. Deeper understanding of user behavior, user motivation, ad targeting, personalization. You can do all sorts of things. You can personalize to even one individual based on what they're looking for. That's what ads do, right? If somebody leaves a shopping cart item, they can target this. But if they leave a shopping cart item and they are gone, what if you know they are value shoppers? What if you know they are high-end shoppers? Your ads will change. It's not about abandoned shopping cart, but it's also about the right timing. If is 5% going to make them take that action, or is it 50%, or is it free shipping? Or is it a certain time in the year? That's when you know that they will make a purchase. We've done analysis where we've seen it's not about pricing all the time, right? It's not about discounts all the time. It is certain other factors that come in play, but that's when you use the data. Again, there's a ton I can talk about that, spend days talking about it. But those are the kind of things you can look at: combination of products, timing, your competition, etc. They play a big role. So once you have the data integration from all these places, you can go deeper, deeper, deeper. What I call is, most of the time, web analysts are in reactive mode. They are doing reactive analysis. What happened? Bounce rate went up. Bounce rate is good. That's what majority of the people spend their time. Conversion is down. I can see the page path. I mean, I have never done page path analysis, frankly. It just boggles me like how people use page path analysis, but because every user has a different mindset. But people do keep asking page path analysis. Yes, certain pages have certain things, but you can only look at that page in isolation, not the whole path. But if when you do these kind of analysis, which is proactive analysis is where you are actually looking at certain things and saying, what will make users do this rather than what has happened? That's when the value starts to come in. We've done so much analysis where we have actually pulled the ROI of their efforts way higher than they would have if it was all reactive analysis. But that's what comes in. That's why I keep pushing and saying BigQuery, SQL. If you learn it, you'll master analysis. You have better insights in GA4. Exploration tool is a big step forward. Didn't exist in GA4. Now it has some challenges. It has a learning curve, but it can provide you deeper analysis. You have to just know what question to ask. Automatically discovered insights using AI and ML. We talked about this, and you can ask questions. And of course, I talked about BigQuery that you can also go and look into. But it's like, start with what questions are we trying to answer before you even go and put the tool in place. Okay, so let's get you started with GA4. If those who are interested, I invite you to become a member of Optizent Academy. And I would love to have you guys in there and help you master GA4 as well as other things that I talked about. If there are no more questions, then we're done. Thank you, guys. See you later.